Our story begins in deep space as one small ship from Ord Mantell was floating aimlessly. Inside, the renegade former Sith Lord Maul sat alone, contemplating his next moves. Over the last few weeks, everything has gone wrong. First, in the moment of triumph over Kenobi by killing Satine, he was quickly interrupted by his former master, Darth Sidious, arriving to Mandalore. Sidious once more showed why he is the master, killing Savage and capturing Maul, imprisoning him in the Spire on Stygian Prime. Maul was able to escape that prison after many long hours of torture, thanks to Gar Saxon and the Mandalorians that were loyal to him. And upon escaping, Maul went to Mother Talzin for help. And of course, that was exactly what Darth Sidious wanted. The Sith followed Maul right to Talzin, and they killed her. Now, Maul was without Mandalore, without his brother, and without his mother. All he had was himself. And after a while of looking for any sort of purpose in this life, where he continues to lose everything, Maul took off to Mustafar. This was a planet where Maul spent many early years training in the dark side of the Force, under Darth Sidious, and it's a place where Maul's anger was sharpened into a weapon. So, he would end up on the wretched lava planet after sneaking past the small separatist security, and Maul would go into the building that once served as a training ground for him. For weeks, Maul would now feel his hatred. He hated the Jedi, but he hated Sidious above all. Sidious took him from his mother, trained him to be a dark warrior, discarded of him on Naboo, killed his brother, slaughtered Dathomir, killed his mother. Maul needed Sidious to suffer the same way he has, and Maul knew the best way to make this happen. He would have to tell the Jedi everything. And around a full day later, the Jedi Communications Tower would intercept an encrypted message telling them to go to civilian transport 3322 CSK in the third hangar of the executive building. They will find him there. Maul couldn't just send a message to the Jedi telling them everything. He also couldn't just fly to the temple. Sidious had eyes everywhere, except for within the areas of regular people. To Sidious, the citizens of the galaxy were nothing more than ghosts in the wind, so Maul blended in with them until a Jedi group led by Kit Fisto would find Maul, and they would quietly arrest him as Maul was brought to the Jedi Temple. Maul would be placed into a temple cell for now, and in council, the Jedi could only wonder if this was a trap. Obi-Wan had to sift through his emotions of pain and regret over Satine, and he said that he will find out the truth. Maul cannot hide his true feelings from him. The Council would reluctantly accept this, but they trusted Kenobi, and soon the Jedi Master would make his way down to the cell. Maul couldn't help but laugh as he saw who was here to interrogate him. Obi-Wan stood alone with the one creature in the galaxy he hated than any other. Maul restrained but smiling with his twisted grin. And when Obi-Wan stepped forward, the air between them thickened with memories. Satine's lifeless body, the life draining from Qui-Gon, so many innocent people dead, and despite everything, the Zabrak's tone was almost casual, as if the war between them had been little more than a game. He wanted to talk. He said that he had information that would shake the galaxy. Kenobi wanted to remain calm, but Maul's presence was like a poison in his blood. Maul mocked the Jedi Order, mocked Satine, mocked Qui-Gon. He just couldn't help it. He was poking at every scar Obi-Wan had spent years covering in robes and duty. Obi-Wan asked Maul why he was here, voice measured, hands still, but Maul was now just toying with him. He had all the answers. He wanted to make the Sith suffer, but he could feel Kenobi's rage. He wanted to see how far it could go. Like Maul, Kenobi could not hide his emotions from him. He laughed about the sound that Satine made when she died, and then the calm demeanor from Kenobi finally broke. The surveillance systems clicked off, and Obi-Wan swung his fist directly into Maul's arrogant, evil face. It was a punch filled with grief, with nowhere else to go. Maul laughed as his head was slammed into the wall by Kenobi, and then he just put his hands up, telling Obi-Wan he knew he had this in him. Obi-Wan forced himself to finally stop, and he centered himself, turning the security cams back on. And now, Maul was ready. He told Kenobi that Darth Sidious had been hiding in plain sight all along, that the Chancellor, the beloved figurehead of the Republic, was the Sith Lord they'd been chasing for years, that the war, the clones, the Jedi's role in all of it had been a carefully constructed trap. He described how Sidious had twisted everything, how even Maul had been a pawn in a far grander design, and Maul laughed again, because he'd broken something deeper in Obi-Wan. As Kenobi stood here in silence, the room was heavy with this revelation, and Maul simply leaned back against the wall, bruised and bloodied, but content in the knowledge that the Jedi now looked like utter fools. Obi-Wan finally opened the door, instructing 6 temple guards to watch Maul. If he tries anything, do whatever they must to stop him. And Obi-Wan went to the council chambers, where the Jedi were now watching the security recording, where Maul admitted everything. The part where Kenobi shut it off was being ignored for right now. Plo Koon said that Maul may be lying in order to divide the Republic, but Yoda asked what his motivation for that would be. He has no role in this war, other than creating chaos. Fisto said that's exactly why he would lie. All he does is create chaos, and perhaps this is just another instance of that. Shakti spoke as a hologram from Kamino, saying that if this is true, it could end the war almost immediately. It would mean that Dooku and Palpatine are working together, and both sides would fight against the Sith. Windu nodded, saying Palpatine has exceeded his term in office by many years, and every day, new emergency powers seem to be given to him. And all the while, Dooku has seemed to know their every move. Eventually, it was decided that a trap must be set. The Jedi Council will inform Palpatine that they plan to launch a secret invasion of Sereno and assassinate him. If Palpatine is truly Darth Sidious, then he will contact Dooku to warn him of this. Mundi said that Palpatine might just contact Dooku with a secure frequency from Coruscant to warn him, and Windu said that is why all communications out of Coruscant must be shut down. Palpatine will be told it is to prevent their battle plans leaking out, as they suspect that a Jedi may be working with Dooku. This will, of course, be a lie, and Palpatine will be forced to go to Dooku himself if he truly is Sidious. It was a good plan, and so over the next few hours, it would all go into motion. Windu, Yoda, Depa Billaba, and Plo Koon would go to Palpatine and tell him that in 24 hours, the Jedi will be launching an assassination mission. It is top secret, but they have the perfect way to destroy Dooku once and for all. The Jedi would leave, and then they would wait. All communications out of Coruscant would be shut down. Palpatine was angry with the Jedi. He planned to make them pay, and he could either sit back and let the Jedi attack Dooku so that his secret identity as Sidious was not in jeopardy, or he could try and fuel the fire that there was secretly a Jedi working with Dooku. Palpatine decided that Dooku was too important to lose this early in the war, so Obi-Wan Kenobi and Quinlan Vos would be hiding out in the executive building main hangar until finally, Palpatine and a few Red Guards would get into Palpatine's shuttle. The data logs would say that Palpatine is going to Chandrila for a banquet celebrating a marriage of some old friends from Palpatine's Senate days. But as the shuttle took off, Kenobi and Quinlan would use the Force to guide a small tracking device onto the back of it. And so Yoda, Mace Windu, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Quinlan Vos, Depa Billaba, Plo Koon, Kit Fisto, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Saesee Tiin, and Agen Kolar would all board a shuttle and prepare to follow Sidious. 10 of the most powerful Jedi in the galaxy, along with Cody and the 212th, prepared for this new mission. All the clones knew that they may be going to confront Dooku, and they were ready for this mission. Obi-Wan and Cody had discussed bringing Anakin, Ahsoka, and Rex along for the mission, but they were out in a space battle above Megiddo. They would learn of this later on. And so these 10 Jedi and the clones would monitor the tracking device, learning that Palpatine was in a hyperspace route to the planet Kaon, not Chandrila, and they would take off to confront him. And when they were gone, Maul sat inside of the temple cell, and he knew it was his time. The flesh along his inner forearm had begun to get infected, as before coming here, Maul had sewn a thin, serrated tool directly beneath his skin. Maul flexed his fingers slowly behind his restraints, feeling the sting where the stitches had already begun to tear from subtle movements. Now, with the best of the Jedi gone, he began to pull on the stitching. With excruciating care, Maul tore the wound open. Blood poured freely out of his wrist, slicking his fingers as he reached in and extracted the tool. It was a razor-thin pick that would work on these cuffs. Working quickly, Maul inserted the tool into the cuffs, and with a faint hiss and the snap of locks releasing, they fell away. Maul exhaled once, and then collapsed deliberately to the floor, pulse slowing, hiding the released cuffs. A small pool of blood formed beneath him, helping make this look very real. The temple guards opened the ray shield door, running inside, stepping cautiously, and Maul did not move until one of them leaned in close to check if he was still breathing. And then Maul moved like lightning, stabbing the small tool right into the neck of one of the guards before ripping his saber from his belt. As this guard died, Maul ignited the yellow blade and cut another in half, then snapped another one's neck. Alarms began to blare as another guard pushed the emergency button, but Maul was already gone, moving through the maintenance corridors that he'd memorized before surrendering. He climbed up through the small shaft, murdered a Jedi Master named Pablo Jill with the stolen blade, and he continued climbing through the temple. At last, he reached the upper balcony of the west spire, wind howling past him, and without hesitation, he ran full speed and leapt out into the open air, wind catching the tatters of his robes like wings. Below, rising from the shadows of the temple, came a small civilian ship, piloted by Asajj Ventress. She picked up Maul mid-air, then took off into space. Maul paid her for her work, and then the two of them went their separate ways. And far out in the galaxy, on the planet Kaon, Darth Sidious would meet with Count Dooku, telling him that the Jedi are getting bolder. They're planning an assassination attempt on Dooku very soon, and they should try and take out as many Jedi as possible on Sereno when this attack is launched. The two of them continued talking for a while, until the facility they were in began to beep rapidly, and a Jedi fleet emerged out of hyperspace. Sidious and Dooku quickly realized they were played, as the Jedi descended down towards them. But, of course, the Sith were always prepared for anything. Dooku had instructed Grievous to wait with a full fleet on the other side of the planet, and Dooku now contacted Grievous, telling him to come destroy this Republic fleet. And so, on the Invisible Hand flagship, Grievous laughed with glee. He was standing on the bridge, about to instruct his ships to take off, when suddenly 2 lightsabers ignited behind him. No, 1 lightsaber with 2 blades. Grievous turned to see Darth Maul himself, and Maul told Grievous he won't be going to help Dooku today. Maul knew all the Sith's tricks. He knew there would be reinforcements here. He followed the Jedi and snuck onto Grievous's ship like a ghost. Maul spoke to Grievous now, his voice low and deliberate, as he told Grievous that neither of them were warriors, not generals, not conquerors. They were tools, weapons forged by the Sith and discarded when their usefulness ends. Maul told Grievous that he, like Maul, was merely the next puppet to be discarded, his strings being pulled by Sidious's withering hands. Maul stepped forward slowly, his saber lowering as his voice sharpened, and he spoke of freedom, of rising above the Sith, taking control of this war. He asked Grievous, why die for a master who will never let you win? Why save a man who thinks you are nothing more than another mindless droid? Grievous growled, defensive at first, instincts screaming at him to strike Maul down. But as Dooku's command repeated again and again in his ear, more desperate now, more dependent, the words began to eat at him. Grievous turned slightly to look out to where the Jedi fleet was. He thought of the surgeries, the pain, the loss of everything he'd once been. He remembered the false promises of honor, of restoration, all lies from the Sith, who valued him only as a tool of this war. Maul's words coiled inside of his mind, offering something the Sith never could: true power, rule, freedom. And as Dooku once more called for Grievous's fleet to attack, Grievous crushed the comlink in his hand. Dooku's voice cut off in a burst of static. The engines of the warships dimmed to a low hum, and Grievous asked Maul what he has in mind for their future together. Down on the planet's surface, Sidious and Dooku were surrounded by the 10 Jedi, and they had no reinforcements coming. Mace Windu and Dooku were tearing through the battlefield with ferocity in their duel. Strikes were blending together like lightning, as the old Count met Windu with a cold elegance. Yoda moved through the air like a blur, intercepting Sidious with crushing speed, as the Sith Lord answered with a barrage of lightning and twirling slashes. Obi-Wan and Kit Fisto flanked Dooku, trying to collapse his space, while Depa and Quinlan tried to hold back Sidious, their blades fending off the tide of red energy crashing against them. The battle spilled into the ruins, across broken metal and frozen stone. Sazitin moved too far ahead, getting impaled by a single strike from Sidious, collapsing to the ground. Kolar tried to intercept Dooku's escape path, but he was lifted and thrown like a ragdoll into the shattered hull of a downed transport. Mundi engaged Sidious directly, giving Yoda time to counter, but Mundi was cut down, body left smoking, as Sidious turned to his next enemy. But the tide shifted. Windu broke through Dooku's guard with a crushing blow that shattered the Count's lightsaber, sending him sprawling. Kenobi moved in alongside Cody and his squad, killing Dooku with overlapping fire and strikes. Yoda disarmed Sidious, driving him to the edge of the cliff. Sidious was brought to his knees before finally being cut down, as the Sith, at last, had fallen. Then, 10 Jedi and the clones felt victorious as they prepared to tell the warring galaxy about what has truly been happening. The death of Sidious and Dooku reverberated across the galaxy, peeling back the illusion that had warped the Clone Wars from the beginning. Within days, the Jedi Order presented intelligence gathered from Sidious's hidden facilities to the Galactic Senate. It was all undeniable. Chancellor Palpatine had manipulated the war from both sides. Even the most hardened loyalists could no longer defend Palpatine. A committee was established to investigate the scale of Palpatine's influence, and the Republic began to reassemble itself. Across the galaxy, the Separatist Senate was panicking. With Count Dooku dead and the Sith's deception exposed, many among the Separatist political class moved quickly to distance themselves from the now discredited leadership. The remaining council members like Newt Gunray, Wat Tambor, Sandhill, Poggle the Lesser, and others found their political protections vanish. Seeking self-preservation, the Separatist Senate offered their location to Republic intelligence in exchange for peaceful negotiations. Within days, coordinated strike teams of Jedi and clone commandos raided Separatist bunkers on Cato Nemoidia, Seleucami, Megiddo. One by one, Separatist council members were arrested without bloodshed. And at last, true negotiations between Republic and Separatists began in hope of peace. But the war was not truly over. Beyond the politics of it all, two beings moved through the Outer Rim with fury. Grievous and Maul had become something new. Cut off from the Separatist treasury, abandoned by the fractured council, the two began raiding remote worlds for resources, weapons, labor. Grievous led strikes on industrial depots and shipyards with brutality, while Maul dismantled Republic-aligned outposts with terrifying speed, leaving survivors only to spread word of their wrath. They moved through the shadows of the Hydean Way, along the routes of Hutt space, reinforcing their droid fleets as best they could. Their partnership fed on shared hatred of the galaxy that had used them and cast them aside. Their presence loomed large in the galactic undercurrent, and as the Republic and Separatists reached a peace agreement, Grievous and Maul were a separate entity that could not be defeated. Their growing forces began to pressure supply lines near the mid-rim, and when raids began to hit medical convoys and cloning facilities, the Jedi knew it was only a matter of time before their endgame was clear. And then, word arrived from the Kaminoan Prime Minister. Separatist warships had dropped out of hyperspace on the edge of Kaminoan territory. Communications would soon go dark, and Grievous and Maul had brought their fleet to Kamino. They weren't there to capture it, they were there to destroy it. With clone production halted and Republic forces stretched thin from reconstruction efforts, the defense of Kamino was a race against annihilation, and the nearest Republic fleet was led by none other than Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Ahsoka Tano. The Council was once more trusting this trio to do the impossible and end this terrible war, and so they went to Kamino. And before long, the final space battle of the war erupted in full force. The Republic fleet, flanked by cruisers bearing the blue markings of the 501st and 212th, emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, cutting through the storm clouds above Tipoca City. Opposing them, the remnants of the Separatists loomed. At the center of it all was the Invisible Hand. Swarms of vulture droids spilled into the void as clone fighters responded, meeting them in battle. Clones flew up from Kamino hangars, and the battle was war at its purest, with disciplined fighting, blaster fire stitching across the sky, capital ships locking with each other as Grievous and Maul watched from the bridge, ships firing all around them, chaos lighting up the sky. And then the unexpected came in. Anakin Skywalker hailed the Invisible Hand directly. There were no tricks here or threats, just a request to board. Grievous snarled at the audacity, ordering the Jedi transport to be destroyed immediately. But Maul intervened. He wanted to kill Skywalker and Kenobi himself. He wanted to see their faces when they fell. Grievous was relenting, telling Maul he better know what he was doing, and the Jedi ship was allowed to dock. Skywalker and Kenobi had been counting on this. It was, of course, Anakin's plan, and Obi-Wan wasn't sure that he let out a single breath as they waited to be destroyed or led on board. As Anakin and Obi-Wan strolled down the shuttle ramp into the enemy ship, they traded glances, and Obi-Wan could only shake his head. And as the Jedi destroyed the droids in the main hangar, far below, a single escape pod detached from the main Republic Venator, signature masked beneath the larger heat of the fleet. And inside, R2-D2 and Ahsoka Tano braced themselves as the pod slammed into the underbelly of the Invisible Hand. Latching magnetically just beside the engine vent, Ahsoka cut her way inside of the ship, intending only to disable the engines long enough to distract the command crew. But things never went as planned. She encountered heavy patrols almost immediately, droidicas, Magna Guards, too many to avoid. Grievous and Maul were ready for a trap. Pinned down in the heat exchange corridor though, she made her choice. With R2 plugging into the maintenance grid to trigger emergency fuses, Ahsoka looked to her bag of detonators, and before the droids could fire, she just threw the bag into the engine reactor core below. And with a flicker of awkwardness in her voice, she contacted Anakin and Obi-Wan to tell them the truth. The engines were not exactly just disabled, they were destroyed. The Invisible Hand was going to fall into the water. Anakin and Obi-Wan looked to each other, and not a second later the ship began to violently shake as the engines exploded. Panic ignited within the Separatist command deck as emergency lights bathed everything in red. Fire erupted from the engine core, spreading like a virus through the hull. On the command bridge, Maul let out a furious snarl, while Grievous cursed, shoving aside battle droids, storming for the nearest shuttle. But the Jedi had no intention of letting the ship fall alone. As Obi-Wan and Anakin raced towards the hangars, they split. Anakin to find Ahsoka, Obi-Wan to find Maul. Amid crumbling walkways, explosions ripping through the ceilings, Kenobi would indeed find his old enemy, hurrying to the escape pods, with ash raining down like snow around them, fire consuming everything, the ship shaking and exploding violently. Obi-Wan ran at Maul, and they fought with every movement steeped in years of hatred and loss. They dueled for a while through the fire, through the smoke, and as the ship cracked loudly, Maul stumbled down, and Obi-Wan was able to strike with swift and a final swing, cutting through Maul's blade and then through Maul himself. Finally, the oldest wound in Kenobi's life was gone. Obi-Wan sprinted to the escape pods as the ship hull buckled, getting closer to the water every second. Cody was already inbound, gunship weaving through fire and falling debris. Kenobi launched his escape pod, and then he leapt out of it as Cody flew by, landing hard in Cody's gunship and telling the clone commander to keep flying around this falling ship. In the main hangar, Grievous was boarding his escape shuttle. Anakin couldn't find Ahsoka, but he was now chasing after Grievous. But Anakin was too late. Grievous took off out of the hangar, and then Anakin saw Ahsoka. She leapt out from a destroyed window in the ship, landing on the exterior of Grievous's ship, more explosives strapped to her back. She looked through the flames and locked eyes with Anakin on the collapsing catwalk. She knew Grievous had to be destroyed, and there was no fear here, only purpose. She gave him a sharp two-finger salute, and with a final breath, she slammed her fist onto the detonator, throwing down the detonators into the shuttle. The shuttle exploded in a huge fireball. Grievous's shriek swallowed in the blast as Ahsoka was flung from the explosion, spinning unconscious into the sky. Robes tattered with fire. Anakin didn't hesitate. He leapt out into the falling air, fire whipping past him as the invisible hand crumbled above. Chunks of durasteel, burning droid wreckage, shattered beams. He sliced through a falling vulture droid as he dived, catching sight of Ahsoka's limp form tumbling through the clouds. The wind screamed in his ears. His hand stretched out, closer, closer, and through the fire, through the chaos, Anakin finally caught her, his grip locking around her wrist, just as another blast roared above. He pulled her in close, shielding her with his body as they fell, the ocean rising fast. Anakin wasn't sure they'd survive this fall, but before the water could take them, a gunship roared beneath the clouds as Obi-Wan leaned out from the side door, and with one fluid sweep, the ship tilted, scooping Anakin and Ahsoka into its hold. The hatch slammed shut behind them. The ship veered out of the fire, leaving the burning skeleton of the invisible hand to crash into the Kaminoan Sea, a final thunderclap marking the end of a war and the death of its last monsters. And as the gunship rose into the sky, Ahsoka stirred, Anakin still gripping her hand, scorched but alive. Ahsoka looked up, asking if they won. Anakin, grinning and out of breath, said that the flagship is gone, Grievous vaporized, Maul destroyed, and she nearly blew herself up, so overall they can call it a win. Obi-Wan, shaking his head, told Anakin he just jumped out of an exploding ship without any sort of a plan for survival. Anakin shrugged, telling Obi-Wan he would have done the same if he was the one who just tried to blow himself up. Plus, he's probably done worse. Obi-Wan couldn't help but smile, saying he is probably right, and Cody flew them up into space, where the battered but victorious Republic fleet was waiting. In the years that would follow, the galaxy entered a long overdue era of rebuilding. The Republic and the former Separatist systems signed the Galactic Accords, formalizing the peace and opening trade and diplomatic channels that had been sealed since the first Battle of Geonosis. Former battlegrounds were transformed into restoration zones. The Senate, led by Chancellor Bail Organa and Vice Chancellor Padme Amidala, passed sweeping reforms to limit executive power and strengthen planetary representation. Democracy would find firm footing once more. The Jedi Order changed with the galaxy, once more becoming guardians of peace and advisors to worlds in crisis. Anakin Skywalker, now a Jedi Master, helped lead that transition alongside Ahsoka Tano. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Plo Koon oversaw the rebuilding of temples across the galaxy, which opened its doors to new kinds of students, and through it all, the galaxy endured. Pirates still raided trade lanes, politics were still politics, but without fear of the Sith in the highest seats of power, things would always be easier. The memories of Sidious, Dooku, Maul, and Grievous, the Force flowed freely again, and in that clarity, for the first time in a generation, the galaxy would find peace. And folks, that is our story. One I enjoyed a lot. Yesterday's story, the Windu Chancellor one, was really just politics, but just really diving into that world. And for this one, I just really wanted to go action heavy. I also just watched Black Widow, because I'm trying to get into the Thunderbolts mood, because I think that movie's going to be awesome. So yeah, I'm watching Black Widow and Hawkeye, and I was like, whoa, the ending scene of Black Widow was really cool. What if it was in Star Wars? And so I took some of the parts of that and made it. Anyways, who cares? What do you mean who cares? You guys do. That's what I'm talking about. Anyways, I enjoyed this one a lot. Very action heavy, action packed. Yeah, I guess that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you want to see next, and I'll see you in the next video.